Life often feels like a relentless storm. Doesn't it? There are moments when everything seems to collapse at once, when the weight of exhaustion settles into your bones. When worries consume your thoughts. And when your heart aches with a pain that seems endless. Maybe you've felt it. That sinking sensation of being trapped in a cycle of struggles. Searching desperately for a way out. But finding none? Have you ever reached a point where you wondered if hope was just an illusion? If your prayers were even heard? If there was still a light waiting at the end of the tunnel? If you have, then you are not alone. Every one of us, at some point, has faced those silent battles. Those nights spent staring at the ceiling, questioning whether tomorrow will be any different. But what if I told you that there is a divine promise written centuries ago? One that has the power to lift even the heaviest burdens. To bring peace in the midst of chaos. And to remind you that no suffering is permanent. Today, we are going to explore one of the most powerful psalms ever written, Psalm 30. This is not just a passage in an ancient book, it is a song of renewal. A testimony of transformation. And a reminder that no matter how long the night may seem, joy always comes in the morning. Through this psalm, we will uncover the truth that God does not abandon those who trust in Him. He is a God who restores. Who turns sorrow into dancing. Who takes what is broken and makes it whole again. If you have ever felt like giving up, this message is for you. If you have ever questioned whether there is still a purpose for your life, this psalm will speak directly to your heart. And if you are longing for healing, whether physically, emotionally, or spiritually, then you have come to the right place. Because the same God who worked miracles in the past is still working today. Before we dive deeper, I want to invite you to take a moment and reflect. What area of your life needs restoration? What pain have you been carrying for far too long? If this message speaks to your heart, I encourage you to write in the comments, I believe in God's healing. Let this be your declaration of faith today. A sign that you are ready to receive the renewal that He has promised. Now, take a deep breath. Open your heart. And let's embark on this journey together. Because no matter how heavy your burdens may feel right now, this is not where your story ends. There is hope. There is healing. And today, we are going to rediscover the unshakable truth: God is still in control. Psalm 30 is more than just a collection of words, it is a declaration of hope. A divine promise written in the midst of suffering. It was penned by King David. A man who knew the depths of pain, betrayal, and uncertainty. He was no stranger to hardship. He had fled for his life, been hunted by enemies, and endured moments where it seemed like everything he had built was crumbling before his eyes. And yet, even in the darkest of times, David held on to one unwavering truth: God is a God of restoration. He does not abandon those who trust in Him. And He never allows sorrow to have the final word. In this psalm, David reflects on his own journey. On the moments when he thought he had been forgotten. When the weight of despair pressed upon him. But then, something changed. God lifted him out of the pit. Turned his mourning into dancing. And replaced his sorrow with joy. Psalm 30 is his testimony, his way of proclaiming to the world that no matter how deep the pain, no matter how dark the night, joy always comes in the morning. Think about that for a moment. How often have you felt trapped in a season of suffering, believing it would never end? Pain has a way of making time feel frozen, convincing us that the way things are now is the way they will always be. But that is a lie. No storm lasts forever. No night is endless. Just as the sun rises each morning without fail, so too does God bring renewal to those who wait on Him. What you are going through today is not your final chapter. The tears you have shed, the burdens you have carried, they are not permanent. David's words are not just poetry, they are a promise. A promise that God will not let sorrow consume you. A promise that no matter how broken you feel, there is still healing ahead. This is why Psalm 30 has endured through generations, bringing comfort to those facing impossible circumstances. Because its message is timeless, God is not finished with you yet, but this promise is not just for the past. It is alive today. In your life. In this very moment. When you cling to faith. When you choose to trust in God's plan even when you don't understand it. You are stepping into the very truth David wrote about. You are choosing to believe that healing is not just possible. It is certain. Perhaps today you feel like you are standing in the middle of the storm, unable to see a way out. Maybe you have been carrying wounds, physical, emotional, spiritual, that seem impossible to heal. But hear this, God is not a God who leaves things broken. He is a God who restores, who takes what has been lost and makes it new. If you find yourself overwhelmed by the weight of life, let this be a reminder that your pain is temporary. That joy is already on its way. So ask yourself, what in your life needs to be restored? What pain do you need to surrender into God's hands? Let Psalm 30 be more than just words, let it be a truth that anchors your soul. Because the same God who turned David's sorrow into joy is still working today. He is working in your life, in ways you may not see yet. But His promise remains, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Hold on to that. Because your morning is coming. Faith is more than just belief, it is the foundation that holds people together when everything else seems to be falling apart. It is the unseen force that has carried countless individuals through the darkest moments of their lives, giving them the strength to stand when everything around them tells them to fall. But why does faith have this power? Why is it that those who cling to it seem to endure the impossible? The answer lies in something deep within the human spirit, a connection to something greater than ourselves. A trust that even in the midst of suffering, there is a purpose, a plan, and a promise that will not fail. History has shown that faith is often the force behind some of the greatest acts of perseverance and transformation. Consider the story of William Wilberforce, a man who dedicated his life to the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. He was met with relentless opposition, mocked, and ridiculed for daring to believe that the chains of oppression could be broken. For years, he fought against a system that seemed unshakable. He faced political resistance, threats, and personal illness that could have easily made him surrender. But he did not give up. Why? Because his faith in God convinced him that justice would prevail. He believed with unwavering certainty that every human being was created in God's image, and that no matter how impossible the battle seemed, righteousness would triumph. And in the end, it did. After decades of struggle, Wilberforce's efforts led to the passing of the Slavery Abolition Act, proving that faith not only sustains individuals through hardship, but also has the power to change the world. But faith is not only about great historical figures. It is also deeply personal. It is the quiet resilience of a single mother working tirelessly to provide for her children, trusting that God will make a way even when her resources seem to be running out. It is the strength of a patient fighting a long illness, holding on to the belief that healing is possible. It is the courage of someone who has lost everything but refuses to let despair have the final say. Faith gives people the ability to see beyond their present struggles and into a future filled with hope. Science has begun to uncover what believers have always known, Faith has a profound impact on mental and emotional well-being. Studies have shown that those who actively practice their faith tend to experience lower levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. A research study published in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine found that individuals who engage in prayer and spiritual practices have greater emotional resilience and a stronger ability to cope with life's challenges. Faith provides a sense of stability, a source of inner peace, and a perspective that allows people to endure hardships without being consumed by them. But faith is not just about personal strength, it is also about surrender. It is about trusting that even when you don't understand what's happening, God does. It is about releasing control, letting go of fear, and believing that no matter how difficult the road may seem, you are never walking it alone. Psalm 30 reminds us that God does not abandon those who trust in Him, that every season of hardship has an ending, and that the night will always give way to the morning. So what about you? Where do you place your faith when life becomes overwhelming? Have you ever felt like the weight of your burdens was too heavy to carry alone? If so, know this: faith is not about having all the answers, but about knowing who to trust when the answers seem far away. And when you place your faith in God, you are choosing hope over despair, strength over weakness, and life over fear. Hold on to that truth, because even when you cannot see the way forward, God is already making a path. Prayer is more than just words whispered in the quiet moments of desperation. It is a direct connection to the divine, a lifeline that strengthens the weary heart and calms the restless mind. It is in prayer that we find refuge, a sacred space where burdens are lifted and hope is renewed. When life becomes overwhelming, when the weight of uncertainty presses down on our souls, prayer reminds us that we are never alone. It is not about reciting perfect phrases or following a rigid formula, it is about opening our hearts, speaking honestly to God, and surrendering our fears into His hands. There is a reason why those who pray regularly experience a deeper sense of peace, even in the face of trials. When we pray, we are not just expressing our struggles, we are releasing them. We are shifting our focus from our problems to the one who holds the solution. And in that surrender, something incredible happens. The storm inside us begins to settle. Anxiety gives way to trust. Fear is replaced by faith. Doubt is overshadowed by the assurance that God hears every word, every thought, every unspoken cry of the heart. But there is another key to breakthrough: praise. While prayer is a conversation with God, praise is a declaration of who He is, regardless of our circumstances. It is easy to worship when life is going well, but true faith is revealed when we choose to praise Him even in the midst of difficulties. Throughout history, praise has been the key to countless victories, both spiritual and physical. One remarkable story comes from the life of Jehoshaphat, a king of Judah who faced an overwhelming enemy army. By human logic, his people had no chance of survival. But instead of relying on military strength, Jehoshaphat did something radical. He put a choir at the front of his army, leading them into battle with songs of praise. As they lifted their voices in worship, something miraculous happened. The enemy turned against themselves, and victory was won without a single sword being raised. This story reveals a powerful truth: praise is not just an act of gratitude, it is a weapon. When we praise God in the middle of our struggles, we are declaring that He is greater than our circumstances. We are refusing to be defined by fear, choosing instead to trust in His power. And just as praise opened the way for victory in Jehoshaphat's time, it still holds the same power today. Even science confirms what faith has long proclaimed. Studies have shown that prayer and worship have a measurable impact on mental health, reducing stress, lowering anxiety, and increasing emotional resilience. Researchers at Duke University found that individuals who engage in regular spiritual practices tend to recover more quickly from trauma and maintain a greater sense of well-being. There is something profound about lifting our eyes beyond our struggles and fixing them on something eternal, so ask yourself, what are you carrying today that you need to release in prayer? What battle are you facing that requires the power of praise? Let this be the moment you choose to surrender, to lift your voice, and to trust that God is already working behind the scenes. Because when prayer and praise become a way of life, chains are broken, fears are silenced, and freedom is found. There are moments in life when everything we have built is suddenly taken from us. When the ground beneath our feet shakes, sometimes literally, and we are left standing in the ruins of what once was. In times like these, it is easy to wonder where God is, to question whether He sees our suffering, whether He hears our cries. But time and time again, stories of resilience, of faith standing firm in the face of devastation, remind us that even in the worst of circumstances, God is still working. He is still restoring. He is still bringing beauty from the ashes. Consider the story of Maria, a woman who lived through one of the most devastating earthquakes of the past century. The morning of the disaster had started like any other. The sun rose. The streets buzzed with life. And everything seemed as it should be. But then, in an instant, everything changed. The ground roared beneath her. Buildings crumbled like sandcastles. And the city that once stood proud was reduced to dust. Maria was trapped beneath the wreckage of what had been her home. Her body bruised. Her strength fading. Hours passed. Then a day. Then another. With each moment, hope seemed to slip further away. But in the darkness, Maria clung to one thing, her faith. She prayed. Not just for rescue, but for the strength to endure. She whispered words of trust, believing that if God had brought her this far, He would not leave her now. And then, the miracle happened. On the third day, when the world above had nearly given up searching for survivors, rescuers heard a faint sound beneath the rubble, a voice, weak but unwavering. It was Maria. Against all odds, she had survived. And when she was pulled from the ruins, her first words were not of despair, but of gratitude. God was with me, she said. Even in the silence, He never left. Stories like Maria's remind us that miracles do not always come in the way we expect. Sometimes, the ground does not stop shaking when we ask it to. Sometimes, the pain does not disappear overnight. But faith is not about seeing immediate results, it is about trusting that even in the waiting, God is still in control. It is about holding on. Even when the world tells you to let go, there is something powerful about perseverance. About believing that God's plan is greater than our current suffering. Think of the countless people who have faced loss, illness, and tragedy, yet still choose to trust. They are not the ones who never fall, they are the ones who rise again. Who keep walking forward even when they do not see the road ahead. God's timing is not ours. His ways are not our ways. And yet, every testimony of survival, of restoration, of healing, whispers the same truth: He is faithful. Even when the walls collapse around us. Even when we are left with nothing but faith. That faith is enough. Because the God who was with Maria in the ruins is the same God who is with you now. Whatever storm you are facing, Whatever disaster has shaken your world, hold on. Because he is not finished yet. The miracle may not come today, but it will come. And when it does, you will see, he was there all along. Gratitude has a way of shifting our entire perspective. It turns what we have into enough, transforms burdens into lessons, and allows us to see God's hand even in the smallest details of our lives. But gratitude is not just a fleeting emotion, it is a choice, a discipline, a way of life that can change everything. It does not mean ignoring pain or pretending that struggles do not exist. Instead, it is the decision to focus on what remains rather than what was lost, to see blessings even in the midst of difficulties. And those who make gratitude a daily habit often find that their faith grows stronger. Their hearts become lighter, and their hope is renewed. There is a story about a man named Daniel, who, after a terrible accident, lost the ability to walk. Everything he had once taken for granted, running, standing, even simple movements, was suddenly stripped away. The first weeks were filled with frustration and sorrow. He questioned why this had happened, why God had allowed such a tragedy. But one day, he met another patient at the rehabilitation center, a man who had been paralyzed since birth. Despite his condition, this man radiated joy. He was always smiling, always encouraging others, always speaking of God's goodness. Curious, Daniel asked him, "How do you stay so positive when life has been so hard for you?" The man simply replied, "I choose to be grateful. Every day, I thank God for what I do have instead of mourning what I don't." Gratitude isn't about what's missing, it's about seeing what's already here. That conversation changed Daniel's perspective. He began to keep a journal, writing down 3 things he was grateful for each day. At first, it was difficult. But with time, he found that his heart was shifting. His pain did not disappear, but his spirit grew stronger, and with every word of gratitude he wrote, his faith deepened. Science has also affirmed this truth. Studies have shown that those who regularly practice gratitude experience lower levels of stress, improved mental well-being, and even better physical health. When people focus on what they are thankful for, they train their minds to see the good rather than fixate on the bad. Gratitude rewires the brain, creating a habit of positivity and resilience. But more than that, it draws us closer to God. The Bible is filled with reminders to give thanks, not because God needs our gratitude, but because we do the simple act of saying thank you to God, even in difficult times, is a declaration of trust. It says, "Lord, I may not understand everything, but I believe you are still working." It is an act of faith that opens the heart to receive more of His presence. So ask yourself, what can you be grateful for today? Even in the middle of uncertainty, there is always something to thank God for. And as you begin to cultivate a spirit of gratitude, you will find that no matter what happens, His goodness is always there, waiting to be seen. No pain lasts forever. That is the message of Psalm 30, a promise that sorrow may linger for a night, but joy will always come in the morning. No matter how dark the season you are facing, no matter how deep the wounds you carry, healing is not just possible, it is certain. Because the God who lifted David from despair, the God who turned mourning into dancing, is the same God who walks beside you now. He sees every tear, hears every whispered prayer, and knows every burden that weighs on your heart. And He is not finished with you yet. Life often feels like a series of battles. one hardship after another, making it easy to believe that suffering is endless. But that is not the truth. The pain you feel today is only temporary. It does not define you. And it will not be the final chapter of your story. God has already written something greater, something filled with hope, restoration, and purpose. And even if you cannot see it yet, even if the road ahead feels uncertain, trust that He is leading you toward a future more beautiful than you could ever imagine. Healing does not always happen in an instant. Sometimes it is a journey, one step at a time, one prayer at a time, one moment of trust at a time. But every step forward, no matter how small, brings you closer to the promise that God has spoken over your life. His love is greater than your pain. His power is stronger than your struggle. And His grace is enough to carry you through right now. In this very moment, you have a choice. Will you let fear hold you back? Or will you believe that God is still in control? Will you dwell on the weight of the past? Or will you step forward in faith, knowing that a new beginning is waiting? Let this be the moment you declare your trust in Him. If this message has spoken to your heart, take a step of faith and write in the comments, "I believe in God's healing." Let it be your statement of hope. A reminder to yourself and to others that even in the midst of uncertainty, God is still at work. There is a purpose for your life, far greater than you may realize. God is not just healing your wounds, He is preparing you for something greater. Every challenge, every hardship, every moment of waiting is shaping you for what is to come. Do not let despair convince you that this is the end. Because it is not. It is only the beginning of a testimony that will one day inspire others to believe, to hope, and to trust in the same God who is walking with you now. So take a deep breath. Lift your eyes. Your morning is coming. The pain of today will not last forever. And soon, you will look back and see that God's hand was guiding you all along. Hold on to that truth. Hold on to the promise of Psalm 30. And remember, no matter what comes, no matter what trials you face, joy always returns to those who trust in Him. If this message has touched your heart, if you have found even a glimmer of hope in these words, then don't let it stop here. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Be the voice of encouragement that reminds them they are not alone, that God is still at work, and that healing is possible. And if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Every time you do, you help spread messages of faith, hope, and restoration to those who are searching for it. As you step into the days ahead, may you walk with confidence, knowing that God is guiding your every step. May His peace cover you, His love strengthen you, and His promises sustain you. No matter what trials you face, remember that He is with you, always working behind the scenes, turning pain into purpose and sorrow into joy. So lift your head. Keep believing. Keep trusting. Because your story is far from over. God is still writing it. Stay strong in faith, and may His blessings overflow in your life. Until next time, may you walk in His light, knowing that the best is yet to come.